Welcome to heCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. As always, I am Mike Chisholm. As always, I am excited to be here. It is a pleasure to do this. I have a gratefulness journal that I write in. Hey, you know what? Stop throwing rocks at me. It's a good thing. Try it yourself. It's a good thing to do. I have a gratefulness journal that I write in, and one of the things in the morning that it asks me to do is to write down 3 things that would make today great. Every single time I have a podcast day, I know it's already going to be a great day. I have never done one of these that hasn't been part of a great day. I love doing this show, and I love what He Changed It is doing. If you haven't downloaded the app yet, what the heck are you waiting for? I am a broken record. Every intro is the same because we are trying to change the world. My wife Candace and her team of dedicated developers and associates within the mental health, physical health, all the health realms of the world are trying to make the world a better place. Go to HeChangedIt.com to see everything. You want to download the app. It's in beta right now. You ain't seen nothing yet, but it's already doing its thing. It's already helping people. We're already getting things, feedback from folks thanking my wife and her team for what it is that they're doing. HeChangedIt.com has the info, but you can download the app on your iOS, on your Android. We are non-discriminatory when it comes to devices or anything else around here. And if you wouldn't mind liking, subscribing, sharing this show, we would appreciate that as well. Now, I am really, of course, excited, as I said earlier. I'm also touched in my heart about the guests that we have today. The story is unbelievable. I'm not going to bury the lead, and we're going to get to it. Now, for folks who have been watching or listening to heCast for the last year or so, you would have known that we came into contact with an organization called Mom Stop the Harm, and have had some of the folks associated with that organization on here on heCast already. And I mean, I think about Helen and some of the other people who have been on here and shared their stories of losing family members to substance abuse, and what substance abuse, the misconceptions that we have when it comes to substance abuse, and who the players are involved, from a stereotypical point of view versus reality. And we've had all sorts of things. TELUS Optic Network has just put our first episode, the first episode of heCast up on TELUS, and it's Helen's episode. We felt it's very important that would be an episode that gets out there to a wider audience more quickly. Sometimes we get a chance to encounter people who don't get the ending that is stereotypical when it comes to this subject matter. The gentleman that we have on today is certainly an example of that, and even more. Guy Felicella, first off, when you're done this podcast, not before, don't leave the podcast before to do this, after the podcast is done, GuyFelicella.com, but his TED Talks on this subject are nothing short of expert from a variety of perspectives, including being hands-on, lived on the streets of Vancouver for decades, and understands this problem that our society, no matter where we live, and the geography of North America, no matter where we are right now, this is a problem that is universal. It's plaguing us all. And just like men's mental health is largely hidden and misunderstood. So Guy has graciously given his time to be on heCast today. We're so excited to have you on here. Guy Felicella, thank you so much for taking time out of your crazy day to be on heCast today.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me. Just, grateful to be able to carry the message to other people and hope it inspires others to do better and be better.
My word, man, you just listen to 2 or 3 minutes of either of your TED Talks, spend 5 to 10 minutes, not even 5 to 10 minutes on your website, and the inspiration already starts to begin. Also, the thought-provoking messages that you give penetrate deep. You are really good at taking messages that a lot of people want to just kind of keep at arm's length, and making them accessible to to the average person who may not, they're going through their daily lives and things like that, and they may not think about this stuff very much. You are really good at creating a thought-provoking, emotional response to this stuff. I assume it has to do with the fact that you've lived it.
Yeah, very, very much. I mean, you go through many stages in life, and you learn a lot from your experience. I often say it's you can't buy experience, but it sure costs a lot. That's for sure. And especially in my life, I learned a lot, not only in seeing a lot, but I've seen the worst of the worst, and then I've seen the best of the best, and you look through that through a lens that develops a character of one of I wouldn't believe I would care as much as I do today because of what I experienced, and that teaches you something as a person, struggling for all those years. And you definitely remember, you always remember one thing when you meet people. It's you'll always remember how they made you feel. That's one thing that I've taken away with life, and it meant a lot to me when I struggled and somebody just cared. And that gives you moments of hope, that when you have hope can lead to opportunity, and when you have opportunity, everything can align in one day. Because I was that guy that people said he will never change. He's going to die. And I wasn't going to give up. But hearing those words also didn't help. And so I think a lot of the times in our society, we reflect on the things that we blame people. Sure, there's comes to a point where there has to be a person takes responsibility, but also people have to have the opportunity, and that's how the system fails people.
The powerful words right there. My word. I want to get into some of those things as we get into our discussion here. Before we do, just to provide our audience with perspective, what is your current position and job right now?
Oh, so yeah, I'm the peer clinical advisor for 3 organizations, which is the BC Centre on Substance Use, Vancouver Coastal Health's Regional Addiction Program, and also the Provincial Overdose Emergency Response Center. And then off to the side, I guess I have my own public speaking company where I educate people on the stigma, discrimination, harm reduction, recovery, all aspects of mental health and substance use disorders, and just through my own personal experience and story. And I often, share my story to high school students, conferences, galas. So it's that's probably my most rewarding work, is definitely educating the youth.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you're able to do both. Even in the intro video on your website, you talk about how the health authorities that you work for have given you the ability to talk about how you feel and your experiences. That's a very small sentence in a depth-filled video, but really there's 2 things to that. Number one, speaking. I don't want to overstep and say you're speaking necessarily on behalf of the health authority. That's a big organization and all that. But the fact that you're allowed to speak with candor about these things and your experience and whatnot, that is a huge thing when you work for a bureaucratic organization where there's a lot of red tape and a lot of opinions and different things that you got to deal with there, juxtaposed with what you get to do on the other side of things. I would think that going to speak to kids, the writing, the TED Talks, the different organizations that you get to touch that way, I would assume that fuels, like, that's living life in color. And then you got kind of the administrative black and white stuff. I assume that fuels the other one, doesn't it?
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, for sure. Because you learn a lot working in organizations too, in corporations. And it's great. Knowledge is a huge part of the power, with how you're going to speak too. And so you learn a lot through that. And I was always good no matter what, even when I didn't have a job or I was addicted to substances, I was good with finding loopholes. That's kind of my ADD. That's what it does. It looks for, okay, this is how it is. So how do I find, an avenue in there to try to, oh, it doesn't mean that I can't do this. And so, those things are really what you try to do even in today's society, is basically look for the loopholes to really support people, because I find, there's been a lot of change, especially the organizations that I work with. There's been a tremendous amount of change where people are starting to actually not just listen, but actually apply some action to behind what's being said. And so that's rewarding to see change, because I've been seeing this for a long time. And I tell you, in the 80s, if you were a substance user, your only option at that point was, you're going to go to get arrested and go to jail.
Yeah.
And that just never helped anybody.
No.
And so at least,
well, it helped
now,
the private prison organization in the States, and it helped bureaucrats
yeah.
create jobs and things like that at the expense of people. Sorry, I didn't mean to be facetious. I didn't mean to. That was the inside voice coming out. Sorry about that,
but it's so true, right? Like that's where, I think a lot of the things that stops change too is because people have made a living off of keeping it the way it is. And so we have to look at, society has dramatically changed in the last few years, obviously with the pandemic, with the overdose emergency.
Crisis, yeah.
We really have to look at doing things differently. And, I've gone and done talks in high schools where, I always say, listen, people who use drugs are struggling. They're not bad people. They're just in bad circumstances. Where it so much impacted a youth to come up to me after the talk, where he said, I really appreciated you saying that drug users aren't bad people. My dad died of a drug overdose in 2020. And I don't share that with people. I say that he died of a brain aneurysm.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is like intergenerational trauma being passed on to this young kid. And I mean, I almost like broke down, but he really felt comfortable to tell me that. But the sad part is that he felt so uncomfortable and ashamed because of how people view people who use drugs.
Yeah. Now, I mean, this is, I usually say this till the end of the episode, where I either try and guilt or beg or plead somebody to come back on after we've had a good episode. I'm going to ask you right now. The reason I'm saying this, you brought up no less than 5 subjects that we could do an hour on, in everything that you just said. Everything from I found drugs because of ADD, which you didn't exactly say, but there's a lot of folks who have. We've talked about that on this podcast before. Folks who have ADD many times will find drugs because it's one of the things that will kind of level them off a little bit. So there's that. Okay. Then we move to misconceptions. Then we move to shame. And I mean, holy smokes, could we do a podcast on shame and what it leads to? And never mind some of the other things that you talked about there. When Helen, Mom Stop the Harm, when Helen Jennings was on and she talked about the idea of, I think about this boy right now, the first thing that comes to my mind is I don't tell people he died of a drug overdose. And she used the word with her, she lost 2 boys in 2 different circumstances years later from each other. The talk about the idea, I mean, the stats better than anybody, how many the misconceptions that we have out there. When people die of overdose, most of the time it's alone. Many, if not most times, it's in the home. It's a completely different animal than what most people stereotype it for. And she calls it poisonings. The language is different. And I think about that boy at that high school right now, and it's like, now his dad was poisoned. The shame that he's feeling at that age is not something that someone should ever have to feel. And it's because of the society that we live in, and it's up to us to talk about this stuff, the uncomfortable stuff. You are very good at one of the things that either somebody said about you or you said when it came to coming to talk to kids at school. I remember being at school receiving that talk. And that's all I really have to say. For the folks who are listening to the audio, I just put up the air quotes. Okay. That talk, when a speaker would come in at an assembly, they'd gather the whole school together and that talk would happen. And I'm not trying to be sarcastic or cynical towards anybody who ever presented to children with the right intentions. That's not what I'm doing here. But what I am saying is sometimes that there are more powerful speakers than others with more powerful messages than others, and topics that'll come through that are a little bit less canned, maybe is a good word for it. I'm trying to be as respectful as I can. You clearly come in and you are different than a lot of these folks, and many people have said that about you. What is it about your message that makes you different?
Well, I mean, I guess, just because when you talk to kids, you have to go back to remembering how you felt when you were a kid. And I think, when you were struggling with anxiety and depression and trying to be accepted and fit in, and you didn't feel comfortable in your skin sometimes. And, when you do these talks, that's where I go. I remember, I have the ability to kind of know the audience of who I'm talking to, but also what relates to them. And telling any kid, I never tell kids to go use drugs, but if they are using them, I definitely tell them that they need to use them safely. So just in that sentence itself, kids would come up to me and be like, he didn't tell us not to use drugs.
Yeah, the confusion.
Right. They were almost like they've just never heard from that approach. And I'm like, why? I'm not here to tell you how to live your life. I'm just here to educate. And they relate even through my struggles. I think one of the biggest things that if we don't think that our youth growing up aren't struggling with anxiety or some depression, it's trying to regulate your emotions is one of the most challenging tasks that I've ever encountered in my life. And as a kid, I didn't have any coping mechanisms. I had undiagnosed learning disabilities, where back then you were just either smart or you were dumb. And I felt dumb my whole life and got diagnosed later on in life, and then realized why I used the drugs. I remember my doctor saying, and it was Gabriel Mate, and he just said to me, Guy, I don't think you have a problem with drugs. I think there's a reason why you use them the way you do. That changed everything.
You just brought up a name. Okay, so you're a guy that works with his wife, who's building a men's mental wellness mental wellness application, and they're talking about, oh yeah, who are some dream people to work with, and what, Gabor Mate. Oh my God! Now I was gonna mention him a little bit later, but you mentioned him now. We haven't gotten to your story yet, and perhaps it might be a better idea to provide a little context. But you mentioned his name. How in the hell did you get associated with Gabor Mate? Holy smokes. You talk about a man who has challenged the way that people think, and has been a light, not just a light bulb, not even a searchlight. He's been a floodlight for insight as to how we view the human experience. I mean, you're talking about a world-class thinker, and educator and healer. I mean, if you want to call it that as well. How did you get associated with him?
Well, when he worked in the downtown east side and worked for multiple agencies down there, and we kind of came in contact at Insight at first, and then he was the doctor at Portland Housing Society. He was the doctor at CTCT, which is a community transition place for people receiving antibiotics because, so as a substance user, I survived 5 osteomyelitis bone infections, which are life-threatening, 4 in my left leg, 1 in my back. And if I didn't get treatment for my leg, I would have lost my leg. And he was one of those doctor, my doctor, that really brought a lens of saying, he basically just said to me, like, how do I keep you comfortable here? And understand that you have to, I know, like, your life. And he didn't judge me for the life that I was living. He said, you have to have antibiotics that are pumped into your heart every 4 hours for 3 months. And how do I help you achieve that? And I just said, well, I just can't be in withdrawal. And I said, honestly, I'd been discharged from hospitals because I couldn't stop using heroin. And I remember the doctor there saying to me, the antibiotics won't work. Well, Gabor said to me, yes, they will. You can continue using heroin. I just need you to continue to get your antibiotics. And it's the reason why I have a leg today. And then he saw my mannerisms because he has ADHD as well. And he said, that's where he made that comment. I think there's a reason why you use the substances the way you do. And I said, well, that's not what people have said to me. People keep saying, get off the drugs, your life will get better. And I go, I have gotten off drugs. My life didn't get better. It got predominantly worse because I didn't understand how to cope. Yep. And he opened a door, and then I was diagnosed. And once I was diagnosed, I just remember the shame just kind of melted away from me, where I said to the specialist, I was like, I've always felt stupid. And she said, Guy, no, like, you've had to actually learn how to function without having any support in it. Yeah. And it just made me break down. And it was a short time after that. I had, brought back to life 6 times, struggled with homelessness for decades, not only as a youth, but as an adult, in and out of prison consistently from 1984 to 2013. I mean, literally, people just never thought that I would have the capacity to change. It wasn't until people like Gabor and others that started to look at, hey, how do we support this guy to get him to the next level? And for me, at the end, my last overdose, which was February 18th, 2013, at the supervised consumption site, and I was gone for about, it took them 7 minutes to bring me back. Took me about 10 minutes to actually get up. And when I got up, the nurse was crying, and I just looked at her and I just said, why are you crying? And she said, because I care. And I just broke down and started to cry. And that was February 18th. My sobriety date is March 18th, 2013. And I basically walked away from the downtown east side of Vancouver with a welfare check and 1 set of clothes, and went to an outpatient program and stayed at a transitional recovery house in Surrey and rebuilt my whole life from that, and got trauma therapy at this outpatient facility where I had group counseling, and my life started to really change. And I built it to, what it is today.
I intentionally avoided your story at first when we started this, because I wanted our audience and the audience to come, because I believe that this is a conversation that should be and will be shared. I wanted our audience to see you now and to hear you now and to have little tidbits of the story, because the story is unbelievable in itself, but I don't want the story to become the story. I want where you're at now and what you're doing now, because you are ringing the bell, the emergency bell, as to what's happening right now. And it's really easy to get caught up, whether it's a dramatic movie or a book or something like that, in the process of getting there. Okay, your story is incredible and you've given enough already enough details about it, but I wanted to talk about Guy in the present, before we went to Guy in the past. Like of course we want to know about how, and I'm sure you've truncated the story to the point where you can kind of go through it. And I'm sure you've got different versions of how you talk about it. But at the end of the day, the present day is where we have the emergency in our continent. I love how you just cut through the bullshit of, there's two schools of thought. I don't want to oversimplify, but many times the average person looks and they see there's two schools of thought that they can kind of look towards. It's treatment, versus the idea of punishment or drug control, or there's two kind of arguments there. And you say, I don't care about either of those things. I care about people. And I love that. And hearing that nurse crying for you, sixth time that you had been gone, and you wake up and suddenly you have a light bulb moment. That woman cared about people. Then I think about Gabor, saying that one thing to you, melting away shame, and others. And I'm glad you mentioned others too. Gabor is just the soundbite that we can, obviously, right? There's but others saying to you and giving you these light bulb moments where shame melts away. That's a huge thing. And by the way, that's universal. There's a lot of guys out there who have been categorized and as a result, categorized themselves as dumb, have been full of shame, have regulated themselves to a certain life because simply they didn't go down the path far enough of self-exploration to ask the question why. And that moment of having shame melted away, I want to talk about that just for a second here. I mean, I'm a big fan of Brene Brown and her work on shame and talking about shame. Not a popular subject, but a lot of us feel it. How good does it feel to have years worth of shame melt away? And it happens in moments sometimes for people. That's a universal thing. You don't have to be, it's not the drug thing. That's a human condition. How good does it feel to have that shame melt away?
Well, it definitely keeps you trapped in a prison shame. And so it's kind of like, being released, like having a sense of freedom because of something you couldn't understand what it is. It's almost like you're trying to figure out the puzzle, but there's a big piece that you can't find. And then when you find that piece and it makes it all clear, like the vision becomes a reality now.
Yes.
The dream that you've often hoped for can become real. It's almost like you can touch it. Now you can see it. Now, dreams are one thing. Hard work makes dreams happen. Mm-hmm. But you have to remove that shame piece. And it just gave me the ability to actually say, let's do this. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we as people celebrate trying enough, because people are trying, but we shame people when the successful outcome isn't to the standards of what our expectation is. Yeah. See, you have to celebrate that people get up constantly. I always look at people that are trying and I say to myself, oh boy, get out of the way, because this guy is figuring it out. And we have to really start to celebrate that people are trying in our society. Maybe they're not getting the outcome that they're desiring, but they're still trying. And I think when you do that, that's the encouragement that keeps the shame away. Be like, hey man, all good, man. I have a guy that went to treatment and he lasted 14 days and he came out and he used and he was just devastated. And I said, what the heck are you like beating yourself up for? He goes, I didn't get the outcome I wanted. And I said, how many days were you sober? And he's like, 14. I said, when was the last time you were 14 days sober? And he was like, I don't even know. And I'm going, well, dude, that's a miracle, man. And you change the perspective for people to actually see that, oh my God, yeah, I was doing it. And it's like, there you go. Now we learn from that and we build off that. That's success.
Oh my God. Let's celebrate trying. Here's to the grinders out there, by the way, all the grinders who are, hey, any guy or gal for that matter, but anybody out there who is listening to this or watching this and is grinding it out, whatever that looks like, whether or not like you got your head down and you're just moving forward, just trying to go day to day. We're thinking about the grinders right now. And if you can just maybe change your perspective, like Guy is talking about, and maybe look to something a little bit to get you out of the rut that you might be in, or whatever that is. The grinding is the skill needed to do that. We just need to get the destination and the route to the destination, but the grinding is the actual skill that you have. Phenomenal message right there, Guy. Thank you so much for saying that. That is a really important thing that we all need to hear. And I want to dovetail it over to changing the perspective, because I can't tell you, and it might be drugs or alcohol. Like alcohol is a drug. Oh man, in your TED talk, when you talk about how, we talk about the idea of how we manage substances every day, and it's fine. It's called your bar. Your bar is there, and it might be the bartender calling you a cab or whatever. That is exactly the same thing as a safe injection site. It's just more socially acceptable. Bam, nail them. Fuck yeah, I love that. So changing the perspective, and that's what we do. I think about any time growing up with the just say no mentality that was just the rhetoric that was pumped into me from when I was a little kid, and the result of that, when I would hear about an alcoholic who went through treatment or a program or a life moment of clarity, changed their life, and everybody celebrates. And then you hear 1, 2, 3 months, 6 months, a year, 6 years, 10 years down the line, that person falls off the wagon, right? And how everybody doesn't want to talk about it, and the shame, and the because, oh no, we celebrated that, we buttoned that up, that was done. It don't work like that. That's Hallmark. That's television. That's fantasy. That it doesn't. Life does not work that way. And you giving that perspective, you're, again, I called you a floodlight. You are that 14-day deal was a good deal, and it was on the right progression and the right path. That's a perspective that we need to have. So that's just me giving exclamation points to what you're saying. I can't thank you enough for saying those things. I want to, yeah. Okay. So we're already a half hour into this thing. When did you, I assume school, learning disabilities, these sorts of things were the gateway to you getting to the life that you got to. At what point were you living on the street? And was it a direct result of that? Was it also problems at home? What was it that led you to living on the street?
Yeah, a lot of dysfunctional home life, trauma, alcoholism. I often call my parents, physically there, but emotionally void.
Mm.
And so as a kid, I struggled with my own anxiety and depression, and saw things that average kids would never see in their lives.
What does that mean? I don't want you to get too specific, but just like give us a little bit of a, like, what does that mean? What did you see as a kid that a
like
lot of kids don't see?
trauma. There was some domestic violence, and
Okay. Yeah.
some abuse, verbal abuse.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with that and trying to, it was. I often knew young, when I would go over to other kids' houses, that things were very different over there compared to when
Yes.
you can compare. I realized, that there was some issues.
Yeah.
And for me, I started running away from home at 12 years old. And
Mm.
I got involved with gangs, even though, when I started getting involved with them, people, they were much older than me, and, people would say that, you were probably being groomed. And yeah, even if I was, I didn't really care, because it was acceptance, which is something that's huge for youth. If you're not accepted in your life of who you are as a person, and somebody accepts you, that's love to you. That felt good. Started going into juvenile detention by the time I was 14. My mom made me a ward of the court, which which kind of really was one of those things where I basically, when I heard those words, I didn't really understand what it meant, but it meant that the province was now going to take over my care,
Yeah.
which was very defeating for any 14-year-old to hear.
Jeez
Um,
Louise. Oh
and
my God.
and then you get out of juvenile detention, and you're bounced around from group home to group home, and you're struggling with learning disabilities, unresolved trauma, and drug use. And I started running away from that and running into the downtown east side at a very early age, got involved with heavier drugs. I'd been forced into treatment as a youth, work programs, you name it. They tried it. They tried to punish me. They tried to punish it out of me.
Mhm.
They often looked at, the iron rod of discipline, that's what he needs. He's just a bad kid. And sadly for me, it just made me run away from everything, including myself. And that's where the homelessness started. I did have some moments of success. I did try to get a life. I did have a couple years under my belt between, 18 to 22, where I was just trying. I wasn't sober or anything, but I was trying to do what society would call normal, to feel like I was part of society, and I just had these overwhelming thoughts of sadness, and then the heavy drugs. I started getting back into those, and then that really was the crux that drove me into the downtown east side of Vancouver from 1993 to 2013. I really never left, either to be incarcerated, and then once I was released, back out onto the streets. So you see a lot, and I mean, sadly for me, the stuff that I had to survive as a youth was only preparing me for the biggest battle of my adult life, which was going to be my addiction to those substances, my undiagnosed learning disabilities, and the mental health challenges that I was struggling with. And so, maybe it's, you looking back, it probably prepared me to be here today.
Yeah, without a doubt. You took one for the
Yeah, and
team.
I
You
I
took one for
believe
the
that.
team. Like, you absolutely did. There's no question. And what a responsibility. Oh my God. Did you ever take one for the team in what was the formative years of your life?
Yeah, I mean, in my, like I always say, the biggest regret that I've ever had was the damage that I caused communities, or people that ran into me or came through my life. Or there's those moments where you look back and you'll never get to apologize to everybody. So what I make sure in my new life is that I do the things to change, so that people truly know just how sorry I am, because I hurt a lot of people as well. And so I don't take that lightly either. And that's part of change, where you accept responsibility for your past. And your past, I
Mm,
always say this to people, is that it doesn't define you.
nope.
What defines you is what you do today. And so I don't carry the shame of the past. Yes, it's part of my story. Yes, it happened. And I didn't want to be anonymous. I didn't want to be part of some quiet, where you just, no, I didn't want anonymity. I wanted to be a voice, because what I see is that there's so many people out there that were struggling. And years ago, where I just said, you know what, I'll just share my story, and whoever wants to hear it, if it helps one person, then that's fantastic.
Mhm.
You just never know what you're going to expect when you start doing that. But the amount of people that have reached out to me over the years, and we're talking everybody from judges to police, to social workers, to counselors, to corrections officers, to everybody, they're just like shocked. I've had Gang Squad call me from the past to say, hey, dude, unbelievable how you changed. What a freaking life you have. Like, even them thought, everybody thought this guy's going to be dead by the time he's 30. Well,
Yeah.
I'm hanging in at 53 right now.
Well, you're a cat, and to their point, in fairness, you were dead a few times.
Yeah.
half a dozen. You got a few lives left. I just and I'm not trying to make light even a little bit. This is just it's an unbelievable story, and the idea, you talk about people caring, and again, we talk about how that's you. You respect people, you care about people. Gabor, same thing. It shows that, corrections officers, teachers, people in the gang, whatever. The commonality here is that humans actually do have that capacity for caring, no matter what their lot in life, no matter where they are in life, they have that capacity. I've got a good friend. Her name is Angie Clowry. Shout out to Angie. She is doing a tremendous amount of work with the homeless here in Kelowna. Advocate in so many ways, has her head on straight, where she can kind of speak both languages. She can kind of speak the language of folks on the outside, or bylaw, or bureaucrats, but then also right on the very front lines talking. She has educated me so much on the idea. I'm going to get back to acceptance here in a second, because I think it's really important as humans, how we have that need to be cared for, to be accepted. Angie has done a tremendous job of educating me about the culture within the homeless cultures, I should say. It's not just one, because there's all sorts of different groups that I think get unfairly grouped together, all of them probably thinking that it's unfair that they're grouped with the other ones, because it's a much more complex thing. You talk about acceptance, and you tried in your early 20s to get accepted by society, to grind it out, to live the life that was taught to you as a kid, that what we're supposed to do, and that didn't do it for you. You moved, and the descent happened. But with that descent, my question for you is this: was there an acceptance? You think about East Hastings. That's the slum area of Vancouver. That when I was a kid, you talking about 93, I graduated in 94. I was going to concerts every other weekend down in Vancouver. We would have to cross over. If we were going from the Commodore Ballroom down to the town pump through Gastown, we had to cross through the exact area you're talking about. I might have bumped shoulders with you. I went through that area so many times, and I got goosebumps as you're talking about this, because I might have walked by you. And I just think about all of the people that I did walk by going through that area. And my question is one of the reasons you got into the heavier drugs, all that kind of stuff, okay, but were you also accepted by this culture down there? And you get we use the term street smart. And I'm certain that you have a much different definition of that than I would, or a lot of people would. But is that part of it? Was it like, okay, here's a group of people that actually accept me for who I am here, and I like that? Is there a part of you that could say that that's a true statement, or did you hate every minute of it?
No, I think you're right. I think one of the things that I related to for sure was that I could see that other people were struggling with pain, and it's comforting to hang around other people who are struggling or trying to find an avenue to heal. That was the one thing that kept me connected, is that people did care about me. We may have not shared our struggles openly with each other all the time, but there was moments of where I've heard so many stories from, what people had to endure through their lives. And the reality is that that connects you. You don't feel so isolated anymore. That was one of the first things when I went to the downtown east side that I related to, was pain. And, oftentimes too, what people see down there and what's reality is that the downtown east side has an unaddressed poverty issue. That's not a drug issue.
Nope.
That's an unaddressed poverty issue. And same with on the streets of Kelowna. Yep. That's a poverty issue. And you see, what we do is we scapegoat and blame it all on the drugs. Then we don't address the poverty issue.
Well, these are those groups I'm talking about that have been kind of lumped together by everybody except for the people in the situation, or the educated. And the educated is a frighteningly few amount of people. Please continue. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a byproduct. If you struggle with trauma, and poverty is trauma as well, drugs become a reasonable response when society sits there and points fingers and doesn't do anything. You know, I just got a friend who was homeless for 5 years in the downtown east side. She got housing, and you know what she said to me? Guy, 99 problems, and getting housing solved 90 of them. Like that, when she said that to me, I was just like, yeah. And then she's got pictures of her phone of her new suite and how she had it all set up. And
She's
she
proud.
said, I didn't want to.
She's proud.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And guess what? Like, shame gone. Like, you know, and it's so friggin' powerful. And her happiness, like to have her own place. Like she says, Guy, I got a door that locks. Like I got a nice suite. I have a bathroom. I have a shower. I have a kitchen. I have my own bedroom. My kids can come see me now. Man, I mean, that to me is the unaddressed real issues behind everything. But we'll all blame and look at society, be like, no, they're drug users, they're criminals, they do crime. It's like, no, it really stems from us not offering people affordable housing. Like, I mean, listen, most people in our society are living one paycheck to the next now.
Yep.
Now,
that's right.
And guess what? People who are struggling with poverty are suffering even more. And yet we're all talking about, you know, what about the economy? What about healthcare? It's like, yeah, but what about helping people that need help the most, instead of just saying, you know, or pointing fingers and creating this language that's very stigmatizing and discriminating against people. You know, last time I checked, poverty isn't a crime.
Yeah. But it leads to it.
Like
we treat
it like it's a criminal issue.
And it leads to it, by the way.
Sure.
Yeah, because
this is what happens when you don't listen. If you look at any place, like Watts, Compton, California, San Francisco, this is what, when you don't address poverty, guess what? That means people have to take matters into their own hands, and that can mean you'll have to sell drugs, but we'll all blame you for selling the drugs to people, and we'll blame you for that now. But we haven't offered people housing. We haven't offered people employment. You know, I think the one thing that's changed a little bit with COVID is that, you know, the economy actually needs people to work now.
Yeah.
And so I always tell people, hey, you probably don't even need a resume. You could probably walk in and get a job.
Yep.
You know, I think we have to do more to really support people along the continuum and change our approaches in society. But like we talked about earlier on the show, you know, people don't want to change because that'll impact the person's employment or their lives.
Are you a Joe Rogan guy at all? You listen to Rogan?
I don't, but I mean, I watch him on UFC or
and you've heard things, I'm sure. Like, I mean, you know, he's right now he is currently the biggest broadcaster in the world. There is no broadcaster that is bigger than Joe Rogan. And one of the interesting things, I'll really truncate it. Joe Rogan just recently moved from California to Austin. And one of the reasons why is he just saw where you know, he's a hockey example. You know, Wayne Gretzky, he wasn't comfortable where the puck was going. He wasn't comfortable where things are happening, the trajectory of what's happening down there when it comes to a lot of these issues. And so he moved over to Austin. And again, this is the universality of what we're talking about here. Every city in North America is starting to deal with this on either minor or major scales. It is as this gap that you talk about gets bigger, as the people who are living paycheck to paycheck lose a paycheck or two, and this shit starts to hit the fan, it's becoming more and more of a problem. And so, you know, he talked about what they're doing in California. I think about again in the States, but, you know, the private prison system, but also some of the things, the institutional things in Canada where we spend our money on. And he talked about in Austin, how this is happening. And the city of Austin just went out and they spent a shit ton of money. They gave all these people housing, and they bought hotels, and they did all these sorts of things to give all of these people housing. And what they've done, and this is just since in the year and a half or whatever that he has moved from one place to the other. And we need to, I'm not broadcasting this because I'm trying to throw people over at Joe Rogan's podcast. I'd like people to come to my podcast. I'm saying that because we need people like yourself, like Joe, who are seeing successful things, like your friend who 90 of her 99 problems solved with housing. We need to talk about that more. I've had a local city councilor on our podcast talking about the crime that's happening downtown because of the housing and what to do about it. These are the conversations that we need to have. Because I mean, that's what's going to help solve the problems. And it's empathy. It comes down to empathy, whether it's drugs, whether it's poverty, whether it's learning disabilities. We need to have empathy for each other. And the almighty dollar needs to take a back seat, because if we start with empathy and we start solving problems, the almighty dollar can actually be made doing that. The whole reason Candy and her team started this thing was Candy was involved in the charity sectors of the world, different charities that she worked with. And she said, you know what? There's a lot of charities out there that really at the end of the day, it's great that they try and help manage things and they help people and they've got their heart in the right place. But at the end of the day, they're not trying to solve the problem. They're not trying to put themselves out of business. I think that's the
Right.
that's the thing. And that's where we need to realize, okay, you know what? Social enterprise might actually be the way to go in order to solve some of these issues. So I don't know if any of that makes sense. I kind of went on a tangent there, but at the end of the day, we can I believe that we can make this economically feasible, as well as make the world a better place at the same time, if we just make that the goal.
Yeah, we need to focus on shelters create the illusion that people are being housed, but shelters aren't homes.
Yes, it's a step. It's a step of the process.
Yeah, we need to go to be solution orientated with a time frame of action. And by the way, if Joe Rogan ever wanted me to go on his podcast, I'd gladly accept too.
There you go.
Yeah,
there you go.
But I think, in our society, that's the reality is that when you have to start giving people homes. And when you can do that, then people can get the support. Then we can build on getting them the support for the underlying issues, whether that's, drug use or mental health issues or employment or undiagnosed learning disabilities. But if we're talking about youth, we look at things differently. But remember, people that have fallen through the cracks and that are adults, they were once youth that fell through the cracks.
Yes.
And we failed them then, and we're failing them now. And if we don't change our approaches on things, this is going to get extremely volatile and worse in our society. So we have to change.
First, to go back to Joe for a second, I would love you on that show. The reason I would love you on that show is because he's talked about this a lot. And having experts on is what he does. He famously talks about how stupid he is, and he wants to have people smarter than him who have been through things to discuss this. And then the other piece of that puzzle is he goes long form. Like I hate to say we're kind of steering towards the end of this conversation when it just feels like it's just starting. He goes 3 hours with folks because these aren't soundbite things that can be, and I it drives me crazy when I see political campaigns, both across the border and up here in Canada, where they talk about homeless, they talk about drugs, they talk about these things, and they try and melt it down into sound bites. It does not work. That may get people votes from the people who actually go and vote, and that's them playing their little game. We're talking about life here, though, and this life is not one that can be lived in sound bites. It's just not. And I love the idea of you going there and being able to shed light. So let's get that campaign going. Let's see if we can make that happen. No, Guy, I'm serious with it too. Like, you'd be fucking great for it. It'd be perfect. You need a bigger megaphone to do this, and I just love what you're doing. Okay, again, please come back on heCast and we can talk about this stuff more. When I told you about we got introduced with a mutual friend, and I talked to you on the phone, and I gave you probably a 15-minute brain dump as to what HeChangedIt is doing, because there's a lot of guys there who haven't moved into the fringe, become marginalized. And a lot of those guys who are in the middle of things that are grinding, the grinders, that are just trying to make things a little bit better. I talked a little bit about that, and I talked about the silent crisis of men's mental health and men's mental wellness. What do you think about what it is that my wife and her team are doing with the app and all of that stuff? What do you think about HeChangedIt?
Oh, I think it's fantastic. I mean, I think you guys are on to something for sure. And I mean, it's already the successful people that you've had on it already, and just the amount of people that are checking it out. I've shared it with a bunch of my connections as well. I think we all have collectively do a piece of it to bring the information to people, to try to change the narrative in our society, because the bottom line is that we care. And heCast, it's we care too. So those are the things, when you care more than you don't, those are the things that can change people who don't care as well, because you have to really educate people with perspectives. And I always say one talk really isn't going to change somebody's perspective, but however, what I hope to always accomplish is just planting a couple seeds here and there. And when you plant those seeds can grow and change. And people do take time. Time does help change as well. Change may happen in a second, but boy, oh boy, the timing of change is one thing that often takes time for people to figure it out. And once the pieces are there, change can happen.
I love you planting seeds with our youth, man. This is where I think their silver bullet is when you go in, the more schools, the more colleges, the more groups of people who are interested, that you go and you plant these seeds to. That's how we change things. That's you going in with a fucking crop duster and getting a lot of other voices there to do this. And I appreciate so much you doing that, and you taking you got the 9 lives, 6 of them are gone, and now you're taking number 7, and lucky number 7, and you're going crazy with it in such a good way. You are changing the world. Guy, I appreciate the hell out of you. What if people want to come find you, what do you have coming up? I want to plug anything and everything that you're doing. I want to get us to start doing that in the app as the development starts to expand and all that. We're still in our infancy. You ain't seen nothing yet with the app. And our friends that have come along with us from the very beginning and recognize us from the beginning, we're going to broadcast them like crazy. But for now, we've got this podcast to do it. What are the ways that people can find you? Social media, where are you active? Where do you spend your time? And if people want to connect with your message or you yourself, what's the best way to do it?
Yeah, you can. I mean, I'm on Twitter at Guy Felicella. Instagram is Guy Felicella Public. And obviously my website is guyfelicella.com. You can reach out to me on any of those platforms. And I always say this to people too. The truth is that if anybody takes the time to reach out, I do take that seriously, and I take the time to respond. And it's me personally that responds. It's not some, assistant or it. I know how hard it is for people to reach out, and so I'm very mindful that a lot of people actually say, "Holy smokes, you sent a message back," and I'm like, "Well, yeah, that's how it works. You send me a message asking for advice, and I'll if I can't help you, then I'll still respond and try to shift you to an organization that can." So yeah, that's where I'm at, and looking forward to finishing off the rest of the year. I have a few. I'm in a mental health conference in Whitehorse in September. I'm in Toronto in October. I'm doing a virtual event in New York City in October as well. And so, yeah, just trying to share the message of hope to people that people can change when they are supported, and that we can change too to help people. So yeah, I just try to carry that through to people. But really, thanks so much for having me on, and I wish you guys continued success. And yeah, I will gladly accept right now that anytime you want to reach out for me to come back, I'd be happy to. to chat with you, Mike.
I can't thank you enough for that. Yeah, it's going to be the visions that we have. The idea of a convention, HeCon, and you have a stadium full of guys or people who care about guys in that stadium with speakers and insights and tools and all these sorts of things. I mean, the visions that the team has are massive, world changing. And you're speaking, just so you know, when that happens, you're going to be one of those guys. I'm going to finish the question with a softball. I'm going to literally lob a softball right across the plate to you, because I know the answer, but coming from you, not just because of your story, not just because of where you're going with your public, all the public things that you're doing, but also because you work for it. And we bring it back again. You work for a health authority. You actually work for the organizations that deal with this, with healthcare. Which is a hot button issue and has been from the beginning of time as our country has evolved and grown. And we've chosen to go, with universal versus private and all of that stuff there. You actually are a cog in the machine, sir. So I'm going to ask you this question, this softball across the plate. So many people out there are pessimistic. Are you a pessimist about the future, about how we can improve things and change things? Or are you optimistic that we can do this?
I'm always optimistic. Hope is the anchor to the soul, my friend. And without having hope, you're not going to have much through life. So I am definitely an optimist and a realist. And, like I said, that's what really drives me, is that I believe. And you know what? It took me a long time, because others believe that I believe too. And that's the thing, that's the message that I'll continue to carry, is that I'll just believe. And until you believe and we push together, we will change things. And it's happening a lot sooner than a lot of people think. So don't ever give up, keep trying, celebrate that trying, because that's what we have, man. We got to celebrate trying.
Couldn't have said it better myself, and we're going to end it right there. Guy, from the bottom of all of our hearts, thank you so much for being who you are, and thank you for coming on HeCast today. That's it. They end so quickly. Again, I talk about them being the best part of my week. They are. I love doing this so much, and conversations like this, especially the ones that end with a message of hope like that. We want to change the world. We're all doing our part from our vantage point, from our perspective. We're all the shining diamond has many, many, many vantage points that come from it, many angles that come off of it. And Guy is a phenomenal example. He's probably the very top of the diamond. He's one of the bigger surfaces on that diamond that's out there, and we just appreciate him so much. My name is Mike Chisholm. That's another episode of HeCast. Again, if you wouldn't mind, please going and downloading the app, sharing it. Same thing with the podcast, like, share, subscribe, all of that. I cannot wait for a time where I don't have to say that message anymore, when the overlords of HeChangedIt look down on me and say, good job, faithful servant. We now have the numbers that we need, that we're looking for. You don't have to shill liking, sharing, subscribing. We're not there yet. I can't wait for that time. Please do that. And you know what? If you've listened to this message, you know a guy that's struggling. If you've listened to this episode and you're this far deep in and you're still listening, first off, congratulations. Well done. That's an exercise in persistence right there, my friend. Second, you know a guy that's struggling. And whatever they're struggling with, whether it's actual substances or the similar struggles that we go through that have the same effects, the shame, the loss of hope, all of that stuff, share this episode with them. There's a guy in your life that needs to hear Guy. Wow. There's a man in your life that needs to hear Guy. That's a better way. Thank you very much for all of your time, for everything, for all of the support. My name is Mike Chisholm. That's another episode of HeCast, the official podcast of HeChangedIt. Go change something.